Equa means equal, nox meaning night, meaning that there is an equal time between day and night when the sun starts coming up over the equator line and we move into now warmer days and longer days of sunlight. And it symbolizes fertility, new birth, and new beginnings. And so today is the 5th week of Lent. And the Living Word book that I think some of you have been reading on Release and Renew, the word for today is vision. And one of the 7 phrases for today is I thirst. So I just thought what I would do is I would review those 7 spiritual phrases. And this talk, we're going to be talking about how I thirst, new beginnings, and the word vision has to do with you. So the 7 words are, actually, I'm going to read them. And what these words are they started, or the celebration of Lent began on Ash Wednesday, and the 7 weeks and the 7 phrases will end right on Easter Sunday. And with each of the phrases, they give you one word to focus on for the week. So these 7 phrases are, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And the word for that week was forgiveness. The second one was, today you will be with me in paradise. The word is now. And that was the talk that I gave a few weeks ago, where I said love is a 3-letter word. The third of the phrases is, behold your son, behold your mother. And this is Jesus speaking to his mother and his disciple John. The fourth phrase was, my God, why have you forsaken me? And what scholars have found is that was actually a misinterpretation. And that actually what the phrase was is, for this I was born, or for this I was kept. Totally different meaning, indicating purpose rather than feeling forsaken. The fifth of the phrases is I thirst. And after Jesus takes the vinegar, he then speaks the sixth of the 7 words, which is, it is finished. And then the last is, Father, into my hands I commit my spirit. And so those words that we were focusing on for those 7 weeks, and will continue to, is forgiveness, now, oneness, truth, vision, completion, and surrender. So the other day, I was speaking to a friend of mine named Chris, and we were talking about New Year's resolutions. And he asked me, well, how many of you keep your New Year's resolutions? Sort of. How many of you keep them for a week or 2? Or maybe say, I don't do them at all because I never do keep them. Which actually our conversation definitely sparked me to renew a New Year's resolution that I had, which is to just sit down at a table and eat rather than standing at the counter and eating my meal. So he helped me renew that. But this is what he does. He says, every year I make a resolution. And what I noticed about Chris is that he was very very well fit. He had this glow about him, and he had this peace about him. And he says, I do the keto diet, I do intermittent fasting, I meditate every day. And he says, why not hone the instrument that you're given? He said, but um, I'm not perfect, but I just keep trying. And I obviously could see the effects of it. But he said, that wasn't always the way it was. Because what happened to him that made him so vigilant was actually something that came out of something quite horrific for him. And what he told me was just, sometimes things happen to people and it just seems like it's just too much. Well, that's kind of what happened to him. And what happened was, well, actually what he talked about is what Jesus talks about, is how we grow from our trials. And what Chris does is not only does he start a new beginning every year, but he does it every month at the beginning of the month. And he resets an intention. Every new start for him is, how can I have a more perfect relationship with my wife, or a better engagement with my kids, or how can I improve my finances or my work, or how can I not turn away from my family or my kids when I'm angry or in doubt. And so today what we're going to be exploring is, how do we set that reset button? Because for him, he says he may have to reset at the beginning of the week, and treat it as if it's the beginning of the year, obviously the beginning of the month. But he said it may be the beginning of the next breath, or the next sentence, or the next thought of, how can I actually be more present? So Jesus, when he said, I thirst, what occurred to that? Here he was suffering, he was dying. And so what they did is they took a hyssop reed and they took a sponge and they dipped it in vinegar and they held it up to his mouth. And what they were thinking is that what he was saying was explicit, meaning he was asking for what he wanted and he was being very direct. But really, what he was saying was implicit. And what implicit means is that there is another meaning. There's something a little more hidden. There's something that is a little more ambiguous. And in the Middle East and in the East, what is implicit is often much more revered than what is explicit. Meaning, what is implied points right to the heart of the matter, whereas what is explicit or explained talks around something and stays at the surface of things. So this thirst that Jesus was talking about is actually referenced many times. And one of the stories you may recall is the story of when he spoke to the woman at the well. And if you can remember that, what he said was to the woman, the Sumerian woman, if she would give him some water to drink. And her response was, well, how is it that you, a Jew, could ask me, a Sumerian woman, for water? Because they felt like they weren't worthy to actually be engaging with him. And Jesus' answer was, if you knew who was saying, give me water, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Because the water that, and he pointed to the well, the water that we're speaking of here, you will be thirsty again, but the water that I give you, you will never thirst from again, or you will never be thirsty. So there's many words in the Aramaic and Greek language that imply thirst, but the word thirst that he used for the Sumerian woman and the word I thirst that he spoke from the cross were the exact same word. So what is this thirst that he's implying? You know, Jesus was always a teacher. And even from the cross, he was asking people to understand his mission. And his mission was to recognize that if we were to ask for that living water, those words of truth, the essence behind the words of truth and inspiration, that we would be filled and renewed and ever allow that spirit of God to emerge in and through us, especially when we remember the words that he said, in you I live, move, and have being, and I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, and I am in you. Those are living words because he's pointing to something, a living truth that can be fulfilled in each one of us. But it's not just our part to know that. It's our part to actually partake of it, or actually to drink of it. And so today I'm going to be talking about ways of how to do that. So my question is, what do you thirst for? Is it security about your health or your family? Or is it about a sense of well-being in your finances, or even in your relationship with your own peace of mind or with God, even when things seem difficult? Do you get still and bring spirit in for guidance? Or is it doubt that you tend to? So there's 3 qualities that we're going to talk about that are probably a good thing to cultivate and refine in us. And those 3 things are vibration, perspective, and spiritual resilience. And speaking of spiritual resilience, this conversation today almost happened by phone, because just a few minutes before coming on, I had no computer reception. And I quickly got on the phone with a computer person who helped me resolve it just moments before getting on. And her comment at the end was, wow, whatever your talk you're doing, it must be working on you because you're amazingly calm. I have to spend half my time calming people down just to be able to fix a situation. So we teach what we need to learn anyway. So I invite you to just close your eyes for just a moment as we talk about the word vibration. Just notice, what are your dominant thoughts? Do they tend to be more positive or negative? What's your mental atmosphere or attitude or field that you're generating around you? Because we know we're like amplifiers. What effect do you have on others? What are you amplifying and sending out? And where are you when you think about specific areas in your life? Happy? Uneasy? Grateful? What's yours to refine? No, we attract what we maintain and what we keep asserting for ourselves. That's our vibration. Okay, you can open your eyes. And we'll explore more of those questions at Spiritual Cafe after the talk. The second is perspective. Is your point of view serving you? You know, it's the lens through which we look out from, and we actually have more choice in the matter than we think. We just think because we were given a particular set of filters to look from, that that's what we're stuck with. So in the bigger picture, though, when we tend to get a little myopic in our view, is what we're looking from really real, right, or true, as Byron Katie would say? And how do we shift our perspective when we're caught off guard? I know that's the one that often gets me the most. So it's natural when we're caught off guard to isolate, to pull away, to take our toys and go home, or to leave the sandbox. And what we'll tend to do is we'll either abandon another or we'll abandon ourselves because we move out and we isolate. And I know how many of you can relate to what I'm talking about. Yeah, a couple nods there. Okay. But how many times do we turn something over in prayer only to say, no, God, give it back to me. I'll handle it by myself. Because, we expect life to be orderly and sequential, and it doesn't happen that way. And so we think, oh, God doesn't hear us. And I just have to do it myself. And it's true, we do have to take action. And if we take action from a larger support, then the action we take actually can take us so much further. Because we know when we're locked in judgment, we actually take away from the situation. We actually can't make a contribution, can we? Because we're thinking either or and not and. So each time we move towards something and face it, we actually transform it. Each time we move a little closer and face whatever we want to run away from, it actually doesn't chase us and run us, contrary to what we might think. And we love to make up stories because it creates order and it makes sense of things. We know we're meaning-making machines, don't we? But our past, our present, and our future are whatever we think and say it's about. It's like in the beginning in Genesis, man was given dominion over by what he named things. Well, whatever we name to be about our past, present, or future, it just becomes so. So what are you saying about those things to yourself? And remember, when that old movie is running you can always leave the theater. You can always go outside and get another perspective. Each time we face what seemingly is stopping us, we're actually building a relationship with our spiritual authority. And each time we listen to our doubt, our guilt, we hold the pity party, we're complaining, we're actually stepping away from that spiritual authority inside us. One of the greatest, I'll say, teachings is know thyself. Know and explore that spiritual essence inside you, because that's where our freedom lies. A successful mindset is be responsible for you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And to do that, the commitment is to stay on the inside no matter what. So what do I mean by stay on the inside? Is stay inside this greater reality that we are actually surrounded by and dwells within us. And when we stay inside that authority, inside no matter what, instead of spinning and twisting out, then our response actually comes from something that is more related to what is real, right, and true. So talking about perspective, I know a woman who's in her 70s now, And when she was 65, she actually learned how to fly a small airplane. And she said that when she would get up above the landscape, her point of view would shift. She would look down at the cars and she could imagine that some of them were caught in their little mind bubble. And it reminded her of, wow, there's such, instead of just getting caught in one point of view, when she's able to see a bigger picture, it helps her lift her own perspective. Like, maybe there's other ways I can actually respond to this situation. And when she's down in her car and she looks up and she sees a plane, it's kind of an anchor for her to remind her to lift her altitude. Because she says when she lands, she's always in a different place. And as we know the saying goes, our altitude determines our attitude, and vice versa. So each time we lift our attitude or our altitude on a situation, we're in a different place, aren't we? And that leads to the third, which is cultivating spiritual resiliency. Resiliency means being flexible, being pliant, and being able to learn from what's happening versus what is not happening. How many of us have said, this shouldn't be happening right now, or that shouldn't have happened back then? And we fight and argue with reality. And that's, we know life is a mystery and there is its own timing to unfold. And often when we look back, we go, oh, that had to happen in order for this to happen, to make me into who I am today. And have you ever noticed that we're all like jigsaw puzzle pieces for each other? Recently, I've been working with a couple that the work with them and the insights and where they've grown has just been short of a miracle. And had this woman's uncle not died, and had I not met them at the funeral, the chance of them coming to, I never would have met her. And the things that ensued and the beautiful changes that they have made wouldn't have happened the way that it did. So we all are so important and so significant to each other. And each of us, there's a saying, who's in the room matters. Well, each of us matters whether we feel isolated or not to contribute to the whole. So Friday night, I saw an older movie by Walt Disney called Meet the Robinsons. How many of you have seen that? Oh, if not, it should be on your list. It's actually a kind of a metaphysical movie, not even kind of, it is. And the story is about a young boy who, when he was an infant, was left at a doorstep of an orphanage by his mother. And his life was filled with a lot of disappointments, even in his young age, and many failures. And 124 times the orphanage tried to adopt him and had no success. And this young man was an inventor. He studied hard and he was always trying to find solutions. And one of the inventions that he had, despite many, many failures, was he invented a memory machine, because he thought if he could go back in time and remember the face of his mother, he could go back and reunite with her, and then they would be a family again. And I won't give away the story because there's lots of twists and turns in it. But what he ends up doing is he ends up visiting the future, and he returns with some new insights. And the repeating theme in this movie is keep moving forward. Your future is whatever you think it's about. And celebrate your failures, because your failures will eventually bring you to what will be your successes. And there was a quote at the very end of the movie by Walt Disney that I thought was particularly interesting, that was about his life's work. And he said, you know, around here, we don't look backwards for very long. We just keep moving forward, opening new doors and choosing new things because we're curious. And that curiosity is a great gift because it leads us down new paths. So my friend Chris, who talked about beginning again every year, every month, the beginning of every week, every moment at times when things are difficult, or even every new breath. He said he learned about this resilience the hard way. He said his greatest lessons and struggles turned out to be his greatest blessing, but he nearly lost everything. He said a few years ago, within a 10-week period, his mother had a stroke. She had a hole in her heart that was undetected. And ironically, her own brother had the same thing a year before and also had a stroke. But she never suspected it for herself, and she ended up with half of her body paralyzed. His wife was involved in a head-on collision by a drunk driver, and he nearly lost her. And she still has chronic migraines to this day. And just the week before her accident, she found a hidden suicide note written by their 10-year-old son. So here Chris was trying to be successful, providing for his family, and then he lost his job. And it took about a year to find that job. And during that time, he was drinking heavily. He was getting lost in video games on the computer. He was being quite harsh, taking it out on his family. And when he finally did get a job, what he did was he just poured himself into his work. He was trying to prove himself. And he was rarely home. He said, you know, sometimes when I came home, I felt like a stranger. And I didn't even want to be present. And so I'd find all these ways to distract myself, because right at the surface was all these emotions, and I could feel their frustration. It just made me want to retreat further. So he felt trapped, but he also felt driven to keep moving on. And when all of this happened at once, it was a wake-up call. He said, you know, I almost lost everything. How did I not see how precious they were to me? Why did I have to let it come to this? And so he says, you know, I used to miss so much. And now I take moments to notice what's emerging, what's occurring, what's new in this moment. And he says, I had to face a lot of things. And we talked about the hero's journey, what Joseph Campbell's talked about, that each one of us has dragons, inner dragons that we must face. And often when we face them, they're not as big as we thought. And if they are, we have to move through them to allow its message to teach us something. So he says, I feel much freer every time I find old habits that come up. How can I cling to them a little bit less? Because I know they're holding me back. And he says, at times when I come home from work and I just want to veg in front of the TV, I make a special note to look at my wife's eyes. And if I see they're glassy, I know they're in pain. I know she's in pain, even if she doesn't say anything. And that's when I'll step up and take over so that she can take care of herself. And he said, and when my wife or my kids, when we want to get into an argument, he says, I've made a commitment to stay on the same side as them so that it's our solution to find. And I don't go into my own corner. I say, how can we work this out together? And I find that what we've set up is a pattern of talking at the dinner table about what did you learn today? And what are you grateful for? Because when we start noticing the blessings, there's more blessings to talk about. And he says, this is what builds our resilience. So I don't know, how many of you know who Jim Rohn is? He gave a talk about how to build character, how to build a strong character. And he says, each one of us, no matter our age, still has gifts yet uncovered. Chisel away to find out what they are. And let them reveal to you more of who you are. Because there is an incredible essence. And as we embrace the season of where we are, each season has its own particular gifts to offer. As we know now from Susan, as she retired from being a teacher and now stepping into a natural role as a teacher and teaching some classes right here on the Unity of Stockton platform. And she's a natural, isn't she? You know, everything we do is a stepping stone to lead us to the next. You know, if we think God's done with us, think again. As we build our life, we're meant to share it. And we're here really to liberate ourselves and others. So we build a higher perspective. We raise our vibration and our resiliency when we not only take the courage to face whatever we're facing, but to realize that we actually exist inside a greater reality. And that true and hidden self within each one of us is this great light. And this light, this indwelling presence, we're asked to actually bring forth and express from that light. That's what is implicit. That's what is implied in all of our life's lessons. So Chris would say, often check my vibration, my thermometer. Where's it at? Are we staying on the inside of our best possibility? You know, spiritual resiliency is like this willow tree that's able to bend in the storm. That's where its strength lies from. Are we willing to be flexible even when things seemingly don't turn out the way we think they should? Because maybe how it's turning out is meant to grow us in a particular way. So what new vision are you willing to step into so that those living waters can live in you? So I'd like to leave you with a practice, and this is by a woman named Cynthia Borgout, who was an Episcopal, or is an Episcopal priest, who's written 7 books on Christian tradition. And this talk was given at a conference on non-duality, and it was called Radiant Intimacy of the Heart. And she's known for her work in contemplative prayer. She said, you know, the word contemplative isn't actually what people think. They think it's about meditating and sitting still and maybe pondering, you know, the word, the scripture, words of inspiration or truth. But she says it's actually very dynamic. And she said it's the path of luminous knowledge impregnated by love. And she says this knowledge eradicates any sense of separation, because this knowledge, this union with truth, is found in our heart. And so she suggests a practice that is talked about in the book The Little Prince, which says it's only through the heart that one sees clearly. What is invisible is essential to the eye. And even in the Beatitudes, when it says, blessed or grateful are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. The word pure means undivided heart. And in the Sufi tradition, they say anytime we have a fixation of mind into the patterns of our mind or our thinking, we have an undivided heart. And we need to challenge that division and not assume its dwelling is going to be there forever. So the practice is this. She says, bring your attention into your chest and bring it to your heart. The heart entrains the brain waves. So she says, be vigilant again and again. When you doubt, choose again and return to the heart. When you're angry, when you're sad, you're frustrated, choose again. Return to the heart. Feel the warmth there. And as we know in heart math, that the amplitude of the heart, the intelligence of the heart is 100 times more intelligent than our brain. The milliwatts that it amplifies or sends out is so much more potent. This is the second brain, or the gut. The heart is the primary brain. And so the heart, what we do is we bring the mind into the heart consciousness, because it's not what we see, it's how we see. And when we see from the heart, our perspective, our vibration, even our resiliency shifts. She said the heart is like a holistic sonar that's actually able to hone to truth. And it's not the emotional heart I'm talking about. It's this heart of knowing that when we actually move inside to this place and listen and hear and see from this place, a whole other perspective is given. She said, we can't be arrogant and see from the heart at the same time. We can't be in division and know the heart's perspective. Its job is to unify and bring us back into union and a holistic knowing. In that place, we're more generous, compassionate, engaged, and wise. And I heard a story recently about an Asian Zen master. And they were asking him about how, he was so wise and how did he come to know all this wisdom? And he said this as he pointed to his heart. He said, because my mind tells me these things. Because he's learned to bring his mind into his heart and draw from the wisdom there. So in closing, I took those 7 words that we're asked to contemplate each week as a way of enhancing our perspective, our spiritual resilience, and our vibration. We do this first by forgiveness with ourselves and others, which allows us to enter more fully into this now moment, where we're not locked away into our past or worrying about our future, so that we can experience oneness, the truth of reality. And from that insight, staying on the inside, a greater vision emerges. Then we can rest in completion, knowing that it is established, that whatever vision we hold for ourselves, we can then surrender in gratitude into the source of it all. Because whatever we hold, the answer is yes. So what are you saying yes to? So the invitation this week is to find that out for yourselves, to see what vibration you hold, what perspective you hold, what resiliency you hold. What results do they bring for you? What is the effect of that? And how can you stay more on the inside this week so that you may drink of those living waters that are always ever available to you? So for those of you who are willing to join Spiritual Cafe afterwards, these are some of the questions I want you to ponder. What's in your life that you need to practice resilience with? What does your mind tell you as you bring your mind into your heart of what's needed and what should be celebrated? And if we knew that God has our back, what would you venture into and expect? Thank you.